As we've been discussing, a new poll suggests many Canadians aren't happy with the way Justin Trudeau's government has handled the asylum seeker issue. But is this situation really the crisis the Conservatives say it is? Joining me now from Moncton, New Brunswick, the leader of the official opposition, Andrew Scheer. So, Mr. Scheer, your party is calling this a crisis. The numbers indicate that fewer people are coming over the border. When is it no longer a crisis in your view?
Well, I would point out that the numbers are still higher this year than they were last year. I think anytime you have this level of sustained crossings into the border at an illegal point in our border between the United States, that it's a huge issue.
But a crisis?
Well, you know, as I said, anytime you have over 30,000 people come into Canada illegally, the impact that has on social services, on the processing capacity of the refugee system to handle applicants from those from those waiting to come from very dangerous places like refugee camps in war-torn countries, I believe that's a very serious issue, and Canadians are rightly concerned about it.
I want to play you what the UNHCR representative Jean-Nicolas Beuz said just a few weeks ago about the idea that this is a crisis.
Germany, which is the double population of Canada, had received in 2016 700,000 to 800,000 asylum seekers compared to the 50,000 that Canada received. So I don't think we can qualify what's happening here in Canada as a crisis. A number of politicians, media and activists have been using that to gain some political point in a debate and scapegoating refugees.
So he is saying overseas the situation much worse, that what is going on in Canada cannot be called a crisis. What is your response?
Well, I don't know that you can come to the conclusion that just because it's worse in other countries that that doesn't mean it's a serious issue here. It has been going on for some time. It's having a major impact on provincial and municipal governments. And what I've been hearing from everywhere I go across Canada is that Canadians want a solution to this. And one of the groups that I've heard this the most from are those who have come here legally. Often those refugees who are waiting to be reunited from a loved one, someone who's in a camp, perhaps for 5 or 6 years now, watching someone coming from upstate New York, which is a very safe place, coming in illegally and being processed almost immediately. That's not fair. It's not right for people to jump the queue like that. That's why I think Canadians are rightly concerned about this.
I noticed that you have not used the word crisis yet in this interview, and yet that is something I've heard from your party numerous times. Given the state of affairs today, yes or no, do you consider this situation to be a crisis?
I think anytime you have a government that allows 30,000 people over the course of a short period of time to come into Canada illegally, the impact that has, that is a crisis. And Canadians have a crisis of confidence in their government right now in terms of coming forward with a solution to this. All we've seen, the only thing that this government has offered is to throw more money at the problem. Canadians aren't looking for a more expensive border system and immigration refugee system. They want a more efficient one, a more compassionate one that truly helps the world's most vulnerable.
To be fair, sir, they have gone overseas to try to convince people not to come. They are trying to reform the immigration system itself. I mean, there are efforts being made beyond simply putting money on the table.
There is an air of permanence at Roxham Road. They have made installations there without a significant policy change, without a decision by this government to say we are going to look at how our laws can be applied at these types of crossings without a fundamental change in without a change of decision, without a change of direction from this government. This is something that could very well go on a permanent level well into the future. And that's part of what today's announcement was about. It was about a long-term plan to deal with these consequences, long-term spending. So that's why we have...
It was about $10 million of spending to help Toronto people who were in hotels for, I mean, that's really only another 2 months.
Well, the minister called it an installment, and you know, the minister called it an installment with the idea that there would be more to come. And I have to take issue with the fact that we now have a minister in name only. Minister Blair admitted at committee that these agencies, the border services agencies, don't even report to him, not directly or indirectly. So all the government has done here is a branding exercise, nothing substantive behind it.
Would you be satisfied if the CBSA reported to him?
Well, I'm just saying, you know, at least it would be a meaningful thing, you know, to have a minister of border security that actually has authority over the border system.
I do have another immigration-related question for you. last week, Erin O'Toole tweeted that support for Canada taking in the white helmets, that was the Conservative Party stance. The Conservative immigration critic Michelle Rempel, as I'm sure you know, tweeted her surprise at Erin O'Toole's statement. And then she tweeted, "Guess the boys met without me, ? Is there a chauvinism issue in your party?"
Not at all.
Okay, so how do you respond to Ms. Rempel's questions and the fact that she and Mr. O'Toole seem to be publicly conflicting over an issue like this? How are you going to handle that?
I think you'll find that our shadow ministers work very cooperatively together, handling a lot of very intricate issues that evolve on a regular basis. And we're going to continue to work together as a team. And I certainly wouldn't comment on the types of internal discussions that happen on these.
Well, it wasn't internal, sir. It was a tweet.
Well, you can read into it what you will. As I mentioned,
was she wrong?
As I mentioned, we've worked closely together as a team on these types of issues for ever since I've become a leader, and well before that as well. And we're going to continue doing that.
Did you have any discussion with her afterwards?
Oh gosh, I talk to my shadow ministers on a regular basis. We talk about how issues have developed on a day-by-day basis. I'm in regular contact with my entire team.
Okay, we're gonna move on there. I'm not sure we quite got to the heart of that, but I want to ask you about another very important issue. You've been very vocal about criticizing the Liberals' carbon plan. You said you got a climate change plan coming. Can you give us a sense of what is going to be in it, sir?
Well, as I mentioned, it is a policy that we are working on that we will unveil to Canadians when we're confident that it will achieve the goal of reducing emissions without hurting the economy. What the Liberals have announced this week is that they have acknowledged the Conservative concerns that a carbon tax would hurt our economy, drive jobs out of this country. What they've done is they've offered.
They've acknowledged that this needs to be done properly in order not to hurt competitiveness.
No. Well, they have offered a special deal to big businesses and large emitters to reduce the impact of a carbon tax on those companies, on those big companies. Hardworking Canadians and consumers will be left to pick up even more of the burden on the carbon taxes. Even more of the share will fall.
If they are taxing companies less, how does that mean more consequences for consumers?
If they are giving a special deal to big companies in order to meet the Liberals' own targets, that has to be made up somewhere else, and that is very clearly going to fall on the shoulders of consumers and small businesses, those that don't have well-paid lobbyists in Ottawa.
I'd like to stay focused on your plan, sir.
We're going to get rid of the carbon tax.
We spent a lot of time on this topic this week, so I'd really like to stay focused on your plan. Obviously, you're not interested in cap and trade. Obviously, you're not interested in carbon pricing, carbon taxing. So are we talking about tougher regulations, for instance? Are we talking about tax cuts? What kinds of ideas are you looking at?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're looking at a broad range of tools to help us achieve meaningful reductions that will include everything from incentivizing reductions in emissions for every sector in our economy, as well as working with industry to look at some of those changes. You see, the problem with the Liberal approach is that it just drives emissions out of the country, and the jobs go with it. We're not better off as a planet when all those emissions just go to other countries with even lower standards than Canada. What we want to come up with is a plan that will keep those jobs here in Canada and meaningfully reduce those emissions. The Liberal plan will just drive those jobs out of the country. The emissions will just be emitted in other countries. We won't be better off as a planet. We will be poorer as a country. Will
your plan respect the Paris Agreement targets?
Our plan will have meaningful reductions targets that will.
The Paris targets, sir?
As I mentioned, our plan, and I know you're excited to hear the details of it, and I will.
Very, as you can tell.
I'll commit to you, Catherine, that when we're ready to, I will absolutely come back and go over the plan in detail with you.
Yeah, but that's not going to distract me, Mr. Scheer. I have to ask you again, are you committed to respecting the Paris Agreement targets?
I know, Catherine, as I mentioned, I am committed to come back and talk to you about my plan once we're ready to. It will have a meaningful.
You told another media outlet in April that it would commit to those targets, and you're not saying it today. So you're backing off that commitment?
Even the Liberals acknowledge that their plan won't hit those the Paris targets. I've made it very clear the targets that were signed on to in Paris were targets set by the previous Conservative government. As I mentioned, we will have a plan that will have a meaningful reductions targets that will respect our party's position, a long-standing position of our party.
That sure does not sound like a commitment to the Paris targets to me, but I do thank you.
It's a commitment to have a meaningful plan that will respect the long-standing position of our party.
Okay, well, we very much look forward to hearing it. Any sense of when?
Stay tuned.
Hey, that's my line.
We've got over a year before the next election. We were coming back in the fall session. We've got lots to talk about, lots of things to talk about, the economy, deficit reduction. We're going to be, right now we're focused on fighting against the carbon tax. We're encouraged by more and more voices coming from provincial governments to help us do that. That's job one. And when our plan is ready, we'll be happy to unveil and explain how we're going to reduce emissions.
Well, we look forward to that. Thank you very much for your time today, Leader of the Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer.
Thank you.